This is Agnew Kerblog. I didn't have enough time to write lyrics for the rest of it, so that's all you get. Hi, welcome back.
Pretty amazing.
just those 4 or 5 words, counting. Good. Hi, welcome back, everybody. Again, I think it's been at least like a week since I recorded a new one of these, but so this is kind of a sequel to the most recent one that I did, and I have with me yet another first-time guest. Who I'm actually, in retrospect, kind of surprised that it took me this long to have him on one of these. But in talking about the topic of choice this time is just nostalgia or childhood wonder. And I thought with just that particular word involved, there was no other person really I could have that would be more fitting. So I'm joined by the critic of such things, Mr. Doug Walker. Hi, welcome.
Hi, I was flattered until you said you were shocked you hadn't had me on yet. Now I'm very insulted.
They're doing these for almost 3 years, and I was like, why have I not have Doug on any of these before? Because we met like Youmacon like 2010 or 11 or something. I can't even remember. Yeah,
we've been friends for a while.
Oh, I thought that this would be a good one to kind of start with. So before I actually get into the meat of the topic itself, not that this is an interview, but I did want to ask you something that's kind of relevant to this, because I'm assuming maybe you at some point have talked about this in like an interview or something, but just for me, just for the people out there listening. So when you started the Nostalgia Critic show, now almost a decade ago, which is unbelievable to me.
Crazy?
Yeah.
I can't believe we're coming up on that.
Wait, it was 2008, I think, right? Or 07?
I think so, yeah. Professionally, I've been doing it for about 8 years, but I did a year before, I think. So, yeah, it's about been 9 years now. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is, wow. Because I still vividly remember, like, I think the first one I saw was the Pokemon movie review.
That was the first one we did when we had the website. Then it was called That Guy with the Glasses.
Oh, okay, yeah. I remember I was over a friend's house and somebody linked us to you and we watched it. Like, oh, this guy's funny. And then now, Channel Awesome is a fucking empire, more or less.
And I'm not funny, so it works out perfect. Full circle.
Shut your goddamn mouth. I don't do that though. So what I'm curious about, and if you have, I apologize if this has been repeated ad nauseum in other interviews, but so when you started the show, what kind of led you to, I don't want to say the gimmick, but more so like the theme of it being specifically nostalgic, old school kind of movies and TV shows and things like that?
I think I was going through kind of my quarter life crisis. I think everybody goes through, where suddenly they're just like, I don't want to adult. I want to be kid. I want to see all my cool kid things when I was growing up, and I was kind of going through that phase. I just got, I think I was wrapping up college, and I was starting to sort of enter the adult world, and I was thinking like, oh, all this cool stuff when I was a kid, unlike the stupid stuff today, man. We had so good when we were younger, and I watched a lot of it again, and a lot of it was not as good as I remember it, but I was watching my brother and a few friends, and we kind of have fun just making fun of it, and pointing out all the things that didn't work, but we thought used to work, and I always sort of wanted to do something with like kind of a jerky character, because I grew up loving characters like Daffy Duck and like Bill Murray and Louis Black, those kind of people. So I kind of thought it'd be fun if I did something like that mixed with when the Daily Show had a movie critic. He would go on and he would sort of talk briefly about movies and show these clips. And I was like, God, I wish I could combine all these things together. And it was sort of buzzing around my mind. I saw James Rolfe doing his thing with The Nerd, and I saw there was kind of an audience for this. I went, okay, maybe I can sort of try this idea and see if it catches on. If not, no biggie. It would have been fun anyway, and I still can't believe I'm doing it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool too to see like in the last 8 years, because like you and James, are kind of, I guess in a way, like pioneers of of the internet review. Like as like shows in a way, like with somewhat of like a story. I know it's not like heavy emphasis on the story, but making it feel like it's like a show and not just like a person talking or whatever, which is what this is for me. Because actually this is a good segue, because the reason I wanted to bring you on in particular. So just before this, actually we're recording this on the day that the Kerblog I'm talking about had come out, but I just did one. About my thoughts on my general thoughts on reboots, revivals, reimaginings, etc. Like, you know, all across the board. Somebody was asking about how I felt about that a while ago, and I was reminded and it was kind of inspired to talk about it, especially with a lot of the stuff that's come out as of, you know, just the last like month or so in particular. So with this, like I was saying, I wanted to talk about the feeling between like genuine, when you really do feel like a kid, and not in like in a cheapened, like, remember blah 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 from when you were like 5 or whatever. Well, now we're bringing it back, and it's gonna be like this,
blah,
you know.
Blah, blah. You shut your mouth. Blah blah blah. Amazing.
Totally fucking underrated, but especially blah 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 2 is where they really hit their stride, to be honest.
Yeah, 3 is where it starts to go down. Time traveling. I don't know. I don't like blah.
And the magic and the space and no, but with like the real feeling of wow, this does that sense of wonderment, like from when I was that young, and like in a really good way, as opposed to just kind of like, I guess, preying on the sense of nostalgia, you know, and not even just with reboots necessarily, but just like that cheap kind of like cash in sort of feeling. Because I think this is fair for me to say, especially with the tagline being, "You remember it so we don't have to." By and large, the stuff that you review does not hold up very well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that stuff gets the best comedy, and I think everyone kind of thinks you have to watch the great stuff to learn how to be great, but I think there's a lot to learn from the bad stuff as well. You know, you can kind of watch it and say, all right, well, this doesn't work, and then people just kind of dismiss it. But I think it's important to analyze why doesn't something work, or even you get into categories like something can be so bad it's good, and why is that? You know, it's sort of these different kind of feelings and emotions you can get about movies or any piece of art, and I think it's fun to analyze whether positive or negative, just why that is. You know, it isn't just magic. There is a reason for it.
Right. And also, not to mention, like, when it comes down to personal taste of, like, you know, people thinking, like, oh, this is completely fucking overrated, or oh, this is totally underrated, especially blah, 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 too, let's be honest.
Well, yeah. Blah, I think.
the legacy of blah was the third one.
With they have a great rap song. Go blah blah, go blah blah, go blah blah, go blah blah.
Dude, I still have the single. I brought it with me all the way to California
because soundtrack.
What if I see? You know, before the real first time I met you, Penis Man was the thing that was created out of that. And now we have the blah 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 series of movies that, you know, has spawned from this. So I'm really happy for that. I really want you to know that.
It started to go downhill, but then they started doing it again and again. You know, in the '90s they got to, you know, extreme blah blah blah, which, you know, was really getting out there. Now they're doing all these reboots with blah blah blah, you know.
Well, in the case of like the real classics, like the real quality movies, like blah 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 2, we were talking about before. So in the cases where you do review a movie that does genuinely hold up, and when you're, you know, ending on your final thoughts, like, no, this is actually really worth checking out. Like, you know, it does have a few faults. It does have a few, like, this was made at this period of time before, you know, they knew how to do this right or whatever, but it still genuinely holds up as a movie. You know, those are a lot more far and few between in terms of the stuff that you review. But what's kind of I guess, like, so when you and Rob and whoever else you have on the crew are writing an episode where it's like, okay, this is a movie that we do genuinely think holds up, but there's still a lot it's still a lot of piss to take out of it in that way. What is kind of the difference between, okay, we know this movie is crap, we know probably most people, or, you know, if they don't already know, then we'll be letting them know, hey, remember this thing from your childhood? It doesn't really hold up that much. What's kind of the difference between when you go into looking at those kind of things and analyzing them for the show specifically?
I mean, anything, it just has to be entertaining, I think. It has to be entertaining / interesting, because I think there's a lot of movies that people recommend or shows, and sometimes they're just dull, they're boring. I think one of our lesser reviews, it has like one big funny moment, but then after that, it's kind of a dull review, and it's the movie where Schwarzenegger gets pregnant, called Junior. And you would think that'd be hilarious, but we hadn't seen it before, so we just planned to review it, and we watch it, and it's so boring. It's such a dull movie that we couldn't get that many jokes out of it. So I think there is something to be said about, you know, there has to be something really sort of fascinating about why it's bad, or even why it's good, because you can point to, I don't know, a really great film like Schindler's List or something like that. It's very easy to point out why that's good, but then go to something like Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which is good, but I can point out, no, this is like really good, and here's why. So I think there just has to be, I always say the sign of a great critic is not whether or not you agree with him or her. It's more the point of view they can offer.
Right.
I like listening to someone talk about a movie or a show and offer something that I didn't consider, whether I agree with them or not. It's offering a point of view that I sort of go, I can actually look at this in a different way, and I can either understand them, myself, or even other people in a different way because of this point of view. So even though we do it through comedy and strange things like you said, stories and characters and songs and stuff like that, I think that's what makes for sort of interesting ideas. It's just offering that point of view that's interesting but also passionate.
Right. Well, you talked about Junior as an example, and I know that because even with, I mentioned the first one I saw was Pokemon the first movie, and that was a movie that you guys didn't grow up with, and Pokemon wasn't something that was part of your childhood. So in a lot of these cases, I know it's like, okay, what are some shitty, funny movies that from that era, that would make for a good episode. But in the case of, say, a movie that say you and Rob and the rest of your family did grow up with, and then when you're finally getting to review it, it's like, oh wow, I loved this as a kid, but it really, really doesn't hold up. Was that kind of like a letdown? I mean, not in the show itself, but to you guys personally, was that a letdown?
In some ways. Here, hold on. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you broke up there.
Oh, no problem.
The two that come to mind the most, where I remember them being so good, and I watched them again, I just went, oh no. One was both the Ninja Turtle cartoon and the Ninja Turtle movie did not hold up as well as I remember them, which is not to say they're awful or terrible. I mean, they're kind of fine for what we were looking for and what we wanted, but as actual hey, you never heard this before? Let me show you this movie. It's really good, really good. It's called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. You just say the title and you're like, oh no, this is dumb. This is so dumb, but I still love it. I adore the hell out of it. But watching it again, I'm like, yeah, okay. They just sort of sit around a fireplace and then suddenly a rat appears in the middle of it. It's like, you're ninja now. This makes no fucking sense. But I still love it, and I still, watch it. I'm like, oh, the turtles want their father back, and their father's a rat. Yes, it's still stupid, but I love it. I love it. I can't help it. And then another one for me that really opened my eyes, because when Fellowship of the Ring came out, I had some problems with it. I still have some problems with it, but, it's still good. But I was saying, oh, it's not like the Ralph Bakshi animated one, because that one was great, because that was my first introduction to Lord of the Rings. And I went back and I watched it. I'm going to prove to myself and everybody watching, I'll show you real Lord of the Rings here. And I watched it. I just went, no, this isn't no, why didn't my mind remember this better? Because it does still have some great things, but it's clearly not as good as the Peter Jackson one.
Yeah, well, no, that I was just about to say, do you feel that the live action movie is infinitely better than the cartoon? Now looking back.
There's a lot of things. I will argue that the cartoon does do better. I'll even argue subtle things that the cartoon does better. But the majority of it does work better as in Peter Jackson's version. And I think for me, I think my big problem with Fellowship is that it started off big and then just went bigger and bigger. And I don't think that's what Lord of the Rings was supposed to be. I think it was supposed to start off small and get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's why I actually really liked the first part of The Hobbit. I thought that was a small story that got bigger and bigger, but then it just got really boring and dull as the movies kept going. So I kind of got out of them. But to me, The Hobbit was the Fellowship of the Ring I never got.
Okay. Well, you brought up Turtles as well. I'm assuming have you and Rob not seen much of the newer cartoons that are based on Turtles?
No, I hear they're great. I hear they're very well done. A, I haven't had the time, and B, particularly with the newer one, something about that CG animation rubs me the wrong way. And I'm not saying I'm right or anybody shouldn't like it. It's fine. I think it's just a style thing. It's hard for me to get into that style. Growing up, I knew people that couldn't watch South Park because they said the animation is too cheap. And I get it. I understand it. But it's I do have the DVD. Someone gave them to me at a convention, and I should watch them. The one thing that really makes me want to watch them is somebody told me about Ice Cream Kitty, that lives in the freezer, and I said, that's amazing. I want to watch this just to see Ice Cream Kitty.
I mean, I will say he's kind of just a gag character. He's not necessarily a major plot point, but
that makes it even funnier. I don't want him to be a main character. I want him to just, every once in a while, they open the freezer, and they're just like, oh, Ice Cream Kitty, and then close it and leave him in there. That's amazing to me. That is unbelievably funny.
Well, because, I mean, I know you guys have seen Turtles Forever, which was the amazing high note that the 2003 series left on. That movie was fantastic. And then the 2012 series, it's funny because even on the reboot Kerblau that I did before this, I didn't talk about Turtles, but I actually think that is a really good example in which case, like, I didn't majorly grow up with the 80s series. Most of my exposure was a lot of the later stuff, and then the 2012, well, the current one, the Nickelodeon series, is the one that I've been following the most closely, and I've been really liking that, and I've been, digging the stories of that one infinitely more than any of the stuff that I saw, that came before it. And the
and I have no doubt it's a million times better than the original cartoon.
Yeah.
I love the original cartoon, but I know it's stupid. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they're really trying harder to get better stories and better characters, which is just still so strange. Out of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's like, no, we need good characters and good backstories and relationships. And it's like, great, but man, you're really throwing that into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's the thing too. Is this is good now that I didn't bring that up, because actually this is a great one to talk about with you, because I know that you guys are big into Turtles. When I look at this, like, okay, I know that inherently, yes, like you were saying, like Turtles is a very, very silly conceptual thing, and yet, it is a massive, massive part of American culture. It's very much something like Pokemon is for me, where in that it's something that has been ingrained, since I was like 10 or so, and it's been such a massive part of my life. And Turtles for, people who are even older than I am, for years and years and years, even before the cartoon was out with the comics and everything, it's just it's like an omnipresent, like Pokemon too, it's an omnipresent kind of thing. More so for America, I think, than other countries, although I'm sure
I hear Pokemon's pretty big in Japan.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, Turtles, I know, Pokemon is big around, everywhere on planet Earth, for fuck's sake.
No, Turtles was like, it really was, it sounds so strange saying it, the Pokemon of its day. Anything, they couldn't get the toys out fast enough, they couldn't get the cartoons out fast enough, and I think people kind of look at the drawing style of the cartoons, it's like, why, and the stories, it's like, why did they put out something that was so obviously so cheap and just so silly? And it's because there was just such a demand for it. And I think a lot of that came from just such a silly idea, but also just it hit kind of the right notes. They were funny. They had these distinct personalities. They fought, and it was just something that didn't exist. There was nothing like Ninja Turtles, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's such a strange idea. And same thing with Pokemon. I mean, I'll make fun of it till the day I die, but it's an ingenious idea. Mm-hmm. This idea of just going around collecting these monsters, you can play this little ball and you have to get them all. I mean, from a marketing standpoint, it's amazing. And from a little kid standpoint, if I was growing up now, I would love Pokemon. I would totally eat that stuff up. So it's, that kind of stuff. And same thing with Transformers and everything, even though you can say, oh, the marketing, evil corporate, it's just there to sell toys and stuff. Because I really admire advertising and, sort of the manipulation both emotionally and psychologically and stuff. But also creating this imagination with it. There is a creativity to it. And I really admire it. Even though I don't get into that specifically, I really admire what they do with it and just how far they can push it.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because especially when you have a franchise that I talked about this in a separate topic too, but when you have like franchise establishment, it's like it never goes away. So like when it gets rebooted, like Scooby-Doo is another example. Like Scooby-Doo has never left. It's like every time whatever the current series is, it finishes and then they like go straight into the next one. And sometimes it'll be a direct continuation of some kind. Sometimes it'll be like a whole new thing from the ground up, or with like new actors or whatever. But with those kind of things, like they never go away. It's not like with, say, like with Ghostbusters, where Ghostbusters is a big part of American culture, but there wasn't a new movie for years and years and years. The only really presence it had after that was the video game, and that was about it.
Are you
So
forgetting the extreme Ghostbusters?
was that long after the last movie had come out? Because I don't know what like the time frame was
I
with
I,
that.
I know it was 90s. It has to be
Okay,
90s with that
gotcha.
title, but it was a little after my time, so I didn't watch it. I watched it
Okay.
was late 90s, but no, I mean that obviously wasn't a huge hit because nobody was really talking about much or anything. But
Yeah.
you're right. But I mean something like Batman has been around obviously for years, and Superman, a lot of these superheroes, and they had to keep changing with the times. And even ones that have been around for a while can kind of fade away, but as we're seeing now with like what Marvel's doing, especially. I mean, they're just bringing these heroes back that really the mass public doesn't know. I never heard of Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
I didn't know who Captain Marvel was, but now I hear these movies are coming out, and I'm like, I'm excited to see them. I want to know what their story is, and I think there really is something to that where you kind of have to change and adapt, and you do have to reboot. You do have to redo this stuff. It's just what do you hold on to that is the essence of the characters and the stories and so forth. And that can be tricky. I'm not acting like that's easy. Everyone acts like this is so easy. You just do this. And it's really not. It's a tough thing to get down the spirit of an idea. And it's even harder to keep it alive and change it and know what to hold on to. It's very difficult, but it's very challenging, but it's also very fun. And it's so rewarding, I think, if you actually get it right.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because like I think I used this example before, but I was talking about that new Power Rangers movie. Look, I grew up with the original Power Rangers like back in the day when it first started over here, and I can look back on that and I can go like this is really stupid. It does not hold up. Like in fact, I haven't seen like the newest Saban Power Ranger series, but I guarantee it's probably a lot better handled. And the thing that I'm excited most about with this new movie is just the description of what each of the five main characters in the new movie are going to be. They sound like they have infinitely more like personality than the paper thin kind of stereotypes of all of them from the old show back in the day. So that in and of itself, I don't hold this so sacred that I'm like, oh my god, the suits look so dumb and Reed Repulsa looks completely different or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm interested. They might do something completely new and interesting and frankly better with this now. But on that same kind of note, how do you feel about like this current age of reboots and revivals and reimaginings with everything? Like, do you feel like by and large they've been pretty solid and like the bad ones are pretty few and far between? Do you think that most of them are bad? Like, what's kind of from looking at it, because you consume so many more movies even than I possibly can, because it's part of your guys' job more or less. But kind of on a general sense, what do you and Rob and everybody else on the crew kind of feel about this era of reboots?
If you asked me, like, if you told me years ago, like, the future of, films and everything would just be nothing but stuff you pretty much already know or already exists, there's going to be very little that's new, I'd be really disappointed. But I think with what a lot of people have done and sort of the new spins they've added to these things and the effort they've put into it and sort of the creativity and sort of these universes they've created with Marvel and such, these cinematic universes, it is interesting, and I do like a lot of them. I'm not going to act like, that I'm not kind of sick of not seeing too many new ideas. I'm always going to really try and push for new ideas, but I also understand why it's being done. It's tough to take a risk, and I think with new media and the internet and all sorts of various ways you can now do film and get media out there, I think you want something. A lot of people want something that already has a fan base, so they're guaranteed to have some profit. And again, there's pros and cons to that. The pros are that you can take something that you thought was dead, and really bring in new life or look at it from a point of view you never considered. I never thought we'd still be talking about Ninja Turtles to this day, or even even with the Marvel characters, we've had three different Hulks in less than 10 years, and they all sort of have something interesting to give or not give or whatever. So I think it's good in that it offers kind of a different point of view, but it also can become very limiting, strangely enough, in that everyone kind of wants one version, their version. It can cause the internet to get really upset, and demand that they want this one version that exists. But on top of that, it's limiting because it's not allowing that many fresh new ideas to come out. There's, if you look at the summer movies, I mean, everything is based on something. And the one I'm looking the most forward to is that Kubo and the Two Strings. That's not, as far as I know, that's not based on anything. And I think those stop motion movies are some of the few films we're getting that's just like a completely original idea. And I think that sort of started with Tim Burton and Nightmare Before Christmas, and that did okay when it came out, but now it's like seen as this big classic because it's totally original. It wasn't based on anything. It had a feel of like those old stop motion Rankin Bass films, but it really was something totally new. But that came out at a time where you had a lot of new stuff, and it was just kind of the norm. Now it's like really rare. So I think what they're trying to do is that with those anyway, they're trying to recreate sort of like those Return to Oz movies or those Goonie movies or those ones that are a little dark and strange, but they're doing them for the long run because they'll make okay money now, but down the road, it'll probably be another Nightmare Before Christmas or a nostalgic thing that people will go back to and say, yeah, that was cool. Let me watch that again. So they're purposefully making them unique and interesting and dark and creepy because they know there's an audience for that. You just got to wait longer.
Yeah, it's funny too because on the note of the stop motion movies, I was just talking to somebody yesterday and they were saying like it's kind of ironic, I guess, and a little sad at the same time that of the ones that studio has produced, Coraline, as far as I know, was the one that was the most successful, and that's the one that just so happened, and rightfully so, it's an amazing movie. It's the one that happens to be based on pre-existing material, and it's like, oh yeah, isn't that? Paranorman is my favorite of that line of series. Yeah, oh yeah, high five.
It's close with Coraline. It really is close.
Yeah, no, they're all, and even like Box Trolls, which like I didn't feel topped either. Like I still really enjoyed that for what it was too. So, my kind of thing too, and again, it's good that Turtles was brought up because I think this is a perfect example. A lot of I do totally agree that in the sense of, and the internet doesn't really help in some cases because a lot of people I feel are kind of discouraged to even want to get into doing something original sometimes. But it is difficult to get people to give a shit about original stuff. But on the same note, I think that with kids, especially who grow up with, what we have now, the more recent eras of stuff like Ninja Turtles, I would look at the Nickelodeon Ninja Turtle series and say, wow, the kids who grew up with this version of it, as opposed to, us who grew up with the 80s version, I think that these kids are a lot luckier because it's like, look at this, like,
big time.
Yeah, it's like
they're definitely trading up.
Yeah, seriously, it's like there's infinitely more, character development. The animation quality has generally gotten better, especially compared to the '80s show in the case of Ninja Turtles. Yeah. And even like I look at Pokemon, like look, I grew up with the original series from the beginning. The first season, and I still appreciate it too. But I'm watching, I'm kind of binging through the current one that's been going on the last couple of years. And I'm like, God, this is so much more in depth for a show that consistently every single week has 22 minutes of animation produced. The animation is really, really good. Some of the fight scenes are like fucking like incredible for a kid Saturday morning kind of show. There's arcs. There's like much more consistent recurring characters. It's like, wow, like. Part of me even wishes like I was the kid waking up on Saturday morning and having this as my first experience with the show because, wow, this is so much better. So I think that in a lot of cases, I think that that by and large, especially for TV shows, not in every case, but especially for TV shows, I think that a lot of those like legacy kind of series, the current ones that we have are really incredible and just I don't want to say put ours to shame, but really like, wow, yeah, they have come a long way. This is not just like, hey, remember this? But yeah, sometimes we have that. Sometimes we do, certainly. But
I will actually. I know it's kind of ironic me saying this being nostalgic, but I will actually make a little bit of the argument that a lot of the shows now, particularly for children, are putting a lot of our past shows to shame. Because a lot of the shows back then, there was a tie-in that they had to have the toys first and the shows later. Mm-hmm. It was all about selling the toys as the first thing. So I think some of them, it could turn out some good stories and stuff. But I mean, when you think about He-Man or G.I. Joe or Transformers, these are not gripping emotional stories. We like them because they found something that we gravitate onto because they were cool, they were neat, and there was enough character to get us through them. But I mean, now we're having shows like Gravity Falls and Steven Universe, and these shows that are tackling issues that even adult shows aren't tackling. And they're tackling it with the use of imagination and great artwork and colors and good characters and stuff. And these the stuff in these stories that can really last and you can dive into for a long, long time. And I think what they're catching on to now, which is really the brilliant part, is that it's profitable. If you write it for both adults and children, you double your audience right there. The great example, My Little Pony. Who the hell would have thought? Would get into My Little Pony? Nobody did, not even the creators. But now that they have it, they're totally running with it. It's still a smart written show. And it's one of those where I think because they went the extra mile and said, let's not just sell toys, let's make something that is interesting and emotional and people can watch years later so it can keep making us money. It's like good is the new good. And I think that's what we're seeing on TV, especially with kid shows. And I think maybe because we did grow up with those shows that had sort of these interesting ideas, like Transformers is a fun idea, and Ninja Turtles is a fun idea. And I think kids want to take that and go even further, sort of make them a little bit more adult. And that's kind of the generation we're getting now with these longer stories. And honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to what the next generation will create, because if you think that we grew up with, Transformers and Ninja Turtles, which, is stupid but fun, and now, but we also had like Disney Afternoon and Batman the Animated Series and Animaniacs and stuff, sort of these groundbreakers, and now we have shows where there's just a ton of shows like that, where there are these interesting ideas and characters and sort of this really insightful, interesting looks on all sorts of social themes that kids wouldn't even think about talking about. I'm curious to see what they're going to come up with in the future. I'm actually kind of excited for it. It's the first time in a long time that I've actually been excited for what's going to come down the road.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I think we did, even though we liked what we grew up with, I think we did know, a lot of it was pretty silly, pretty dumb, with some real gems in there. But... well, and some bad gems, like the show gem. But it's one of those things where it's like there's actually kind of this excitement that there are these risks being taken in children's TV in many respects that you couldn't do back then. But then other things are limited, like, I don't know, you can't go as dark or you can't hold a gun. Or I don't know what the PC stuff is. But, and it's like, okay, pros and cons, whatever. But I don't know. I'm really intrigued to see where entertainment goes, what this generation is gonna push out.
Yeah, I mean, you and I could go on and on about Gravity Falls and Steven, to the fucking cows come home. We're definitely in a really good, like, new golden age of, like, creator-driven animated shows on the original side, for sure. I'm glad that you brought up, I totally forgot to mention My Little Pony, but actually, even further than that, what I give all sorts of credit to Hasbro for was when they started the Hasbro Hub at the time, was they had the kind of triple threat of Transformers Prime, G.I. Joe Renegades, and My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, where it's like, hey, okay, we know that we're going to sell these toys because this is a legacy franchise. It's been around forever. The toys alone will sell themselves. So, hey, why don't we try to get the new audience of kids by making versions of these characters, or in even some cases, like new characters entirely, who will be really in depth, and the kids watching these shows will get attached to, and and then as a result of that, on the cigar crunching business side of things, they'll want to go out and get toys of them because they love those characters so dearly, and not just because, oh, they're a pretty pony, or oh, they're a cool army guy, or a badass robot that turns into this kind of car, or whatever. Because all three of those shows were incredibly solid. They had incredibly talented designers and writers and artists and things working on all of them. Great shows all around. My Little Pony was the golden child that kind of ascended to, I think now it's in like its 6th season still to this day, which is incredible. Something kind of switching gears now. Something I kind of wanted to bring up that I wasn't even planning to be part of this topic, but I think it's actually very relevant. So for those of you guys out there who haven't been following the vlogs that Doug and Rob have been doing about shows like Steven Universe and Gravity Falls, and more recently your actual thoughts on movies that you have done Nostalgia Critic episodes on. So you guys recently did one about Pokemon the first movie. and you were talking as a whole about the Pokemon franchise and like, you know, the pros and cons, and like you were saying earlier today about like, yeah, no shit, it's successful because it's brilliant in this case. One of the kind of funny things about that, I was commenting on it on the video, but I think it's worth bringing up here too. So the gotta catch 'em all, collecting all of them mentality thing, right? So first of all, that, as far as I know, gotta catch 'em all was an American-only thing. Because by the time Pokemon was massive in Japan, yeah, and because, and if I could be wrong, but I believe I'm right on this. So somebody correct me and castrate me if you want. But by the time that Pokemon came to America, it was already massive in Japan. The games and the show had been out for at least a year or two, and then they knew, oh hey, the collecting all 151 at the time aspect is really marketable and people really like that. Let's make a big thing out of that. So they put Gotta Catch 'Em All as the major thing. But the funny thing about that is that while, yes, collecting them was at the time a big factor of it, by the time they got to the third game, like the third, you know, generation of Pokemon game, they took that out because they realized, okay, by the time we have 400 different creatures, nobody wants to do that anymore because that's not the enjoyment factor. And what I would say, and I think most people would agree with me on this who, you know, have followed it for a long time, the major you know, draw of Pokemon as a series in general, like, you know, I mean everything, the show, the games, the toys, everything, is the kind of meat of what I wanted to get to with this topic is the idea of childhood wonder. The idea of, oh my God, I can be a 10-year-old kid, go out and explore the world, you know, bond with these really cool, like, kind of superpowered animal creatures, and, you know, compete in these cool things and bond with them and have like these great life experiences and etc. Like most people I know, like they have their favorites and that's it. Like there are very, very, very few people I know who actually do go out of their way. In fact, I don't know any of them at all, but I know that they're out there that actually do with every new game. They try to collect all, you know, 700 something of them that exist. But that's a very small niche because that's not the major enjoyment factor. And what's kind of ironic is because you guys were talking about Pokemon Go on that vlog. People I know who never gave a fuck about Pokemon Go are absolutely addicted to that game because they're completely.
I know several too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and the funny thing about that is Pokemon Go, like, you know, as a person who's still a fan of Pokemon, I haven't been playing that at all. I'm more excited about the new actual game Sun and Moon coming out because that's the real experience to me. Pokemon Go to me is literally that kind of fun feeling of, oh, collecting them all and etc. Which, by the way, whoever described to you how that game works had literally never fucking played Pokemon Go before because that's not how it works.
Well, no, and that's, I'm hearing more and more like when everybody say he is so misinformed, he is so blah blah blah, and it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't even play games on my PS3 anymore. Yeah. Don't worry about it. But no, honestly, and what I'm finding out more and more with this game, you know more about Pokemon than I do, whether or not this is true. It is kind of sounding like whoever came up with this was like, you know, we have this, we have the power, we have this empire. Let's see if we can really put it to some good, where we can have something that, yeah, it's a business, but it can also get all these people that are just watching the TV shows and playing the games and stuff and actually force them to go outside and interact with people and be social with people.
Yeah.
Because I know there's like cons to Pokemon Go, like bad things about it, but honestly, I'm seeing a lot more pros. You know, this is as someone who's not an expert, doesn't even know how the game really works, but I'm just hearing so many good things about it from people that I really trust, and I'm just seeing people go outside and interact, and it's even helping with people that are afraid to go outside and afraid to be social with others, that they have something they can connect with. And I think that really is taking, you know, sort of this media idea that, you know, seem like, oh, you're just trying to sell stuff. And you could argue it's still that, but it is being used for good. And I think that's just really phenomenal. And I love it when you can combine those two things. And I think that's why I do get excited when, even if I don't get into an idea like Pokemon, I'm excited for how smart it is and maybe the potential of what can come from it. Because I think we're really seeing that. We're seeing good stuff come from this.
Absolutely. And I think, like, because even the people I know who are really big into it, they fully are like, no, it's as a game, like just from a gameplay standpoint, it's a shitty mobile game, like unabashedly. I think, yeah, definitely the fact that it's pushing the social aspect, which was a major factor of when the original Red and Blue games came out on Game Boy is that it was getting kids to interact and socialize and trade and battle and etc. And also just the fact that it was so fucking massive. It was something for literally everybody on planet Earth to talk about with each other.
Yeah.
And I think like, I haven't seen kids playing it before. Which is funny. I've mostly seen adults play it.
Yeah.
But I would imagine like, if I were 10 or 12 again, like, when Red and Blue first came out, I was still in elementary school. I would imagine the pure kind of like just raw enjoyment factor of playing that it's the closest thing to feeling like you're really catching a Pokemon. Because I remember actually you might be interested in this. There was a commentary with some of the folks from the now defunct 4Kids, the studio that did the English dubs for the series and the movies. They were doing a commentary as the director and producer on one of the later Pokemon movies, and they were talking about, what do you think it is that the kids like Pokemon so much? And the producer was saying, I think that the biggest reason that kids love it, that you'll never necessarily hear because they might not know how to describe it, is that they wish that it was real. They wish that they could actually be a kid going on these adventures, having these experiences, bonding with these creatures and stuff. That is so, like in a way magical. I know it sounds like a generic word to use, but it is that kind of thing.
Well, and even the creatures are drawn very kid-friendly. I mean, you want to hug them, you want to squeeze them, but they also kick ass, so it's also kind of like this very middle-of-the-road kind of thing where it's like, yeah, they're fighting, but they're these adorable little big-eyed weird creations, and you can make new ones, and they make these little sounds. I mean, it's something where you can very easily see why it caught on. It kind of reminds me with Harry Potter when that first started coming out. I never really got into Harry Potter. It's not bad. It's just not my thing. But it got people reading. And when I was growing up, just kids didn't read. You were kind of like the nerd or the weirdo or whatever if you just wanted to stay in and read, or even have groups of people that read or something like that. Now it's like, it's a huge thing. There's young adult books and there's a lot more kids books and stuff. And again, I mean, I don't care what it takes. I don't care. I don't have to be into it to acknowledge it's doing something that's, really, really good.
Well, taking off of the what we got out of that, but going off of the Pokemon train, because we've been on that for 20 minutes now. So I just, like in this past week, I just watched the first episode, only the first, so I swear to God, none of you in the fucking comments better say a goddamn thing, of Stranger Things. And I'm really excited to get further into it. I loved the first episode. I don't know if you've seen much of it yet.
Oh, I've seen the whole thing.
Okay.
Very fast.
Okay. Awesome. I'm very excited to get more into it. And but the biggest kind of consistent thing that I'm hearing from people about it is, and I'm sad to say, and I would like to go back and actually watch it. I did not grow up with the Goonies.
I actually didn't either. I missed that one.
Okay.
I watched it later, so I'll probably identify with you on this.
Okay.
I did watch it eventually.
Well, the thing is, a lot of people say that it incites a lot of the same kind of like feeling as a movie like it's not like it's like a spiritual successor or whatever, maybe necessarily, but they say it elicits the same kind of feelings in terms of like our group of kids in a live action format, kind of storytelling.
Yeah, particularly boys. A big emphasis on the boys, I think.
Yeah.
It's not, they do come across a girl, but I mean, it's mainly about the group of boys. I think that was a big 80s thing.
Yeah.
It's like you might have a girl, but it's like always that it was boys working off each other usually.
Well, even from the first episode, I can tell like, oh wow, the main girl kid character. I'm like, I am very, very intrigued about you. What's going on with you?
And that's what's so good. She's not like a token.
Yeah. Thank God.
They're all interesting characters. I mean, it's a very well done show.
No, I swear to God, when I see I'm the girl character, I'm just like, please stop for fun. And just in general and anything lately. Yeah. Well, so on that kind of, I mean, you'll have the authority of having seen the full thing, but do you feel like there's a lot of stuff now that, because this is what I'm talking about, the difference between just, wow, nostalgia, like blah, 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 this and that, like when you were a kid or whatever, remember this, and wow, I really feel like I'm a kid and I don't fully understand everything about the world and everything around me is like amazing and intriguing. Like, do you feel like that there's a lot of stuff like Stranger Things and even like Steven Universe and stuff like that does elicit that kind of feeling, not just in the target audience, but with people our age?
Oh, definitely. And I think that's why Stranger Things is such a hit. because it's a few years ago we had a movie called Super 8, and I was trying to do the same thing, and it was okay. It was a genuine effort, and it was all right. But I think with this, it got so many of the small details, and it wasn't shoving it in your face for the most part. You could argue the credits are a little bit in the show, but for the most part, it's not shoving it in your face. It's just being one of these kind of films, even though it's a show. And it's even kind of going that extra mile because I think you could argue, I sort of call it Steven Spielberg King. It's kind of Stephen King and Steven Spielberg because it does go a lot darker and sort of more violent than those kind of kids films would. But some of them did go pretty dark, and I think it is kind of like we want to give you one of these kids movies from the 80s, but we're going to grow it up a little bit. Now that you're an adult, we want you to enjoy it as an adult. And I think it's just the right mix, and I think a lot of it comes from that excitement of what's going to happen next. It's a mixture of familiarity and new material and an actual and a exact probably an excitement of equal amounts for both the familiar and the new material. I think that's kind of the secret formula. That's why something like Steven Universe works for us or Gravity Falls, because we remember the bright colors. We remember kind of these kid-like environments. We remember that excitement, but we also don't know what's going to happen, and they're sort of introducing new ideas and new themes we don't really see in kid shows as well, and some of them are pretty adult, so they can really hit us and get us excited for something new. So I think that's probably the secret formula, sort of this mix of, in both equal parts, a mix of something that's very familiar but also very new, and you're excited for both.
Yeah, I guess to go on the subject of the ones we could talk about for ages, Steven Universe and Gravity Falls, I think Alex Hirsch and Rebecca Sugar both absolutely found like a specific kind of thing that works with their storytelling style that really captures that kind of thing. In the case of Rebecca, I think this was actually talked about maybe like a couple years ago into the show, where she mentioned that everything that happens in the show is meant to be pretty much exclusively from Steven's perspective, in which case if there are certain things that go a little bit too out of the realm of what a kid his age would understand, and she specifically cited the relationship between Lars and Sadie, in which case he's too young to really understand, like, okay, what the fuck is actually going on with them that we don't see, which could be stuff that is also probably not appropriate to show on Cartoon Network, But I love that because the implication I think that comes from, especially one of the recent episodes that I'm sure you guys have seen by this point, where it's like, oh, okay, where like it is coming from his perspective, and he's like, whoa, I don't understand what the deal is with this, and I'm kind of freaking out about it, kind of thing. Like that makes for such intriguing stories from a kid's perspective that are not talking down to any part of the audience.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, that was it. Go ahead.
Again, one of my favorite films that have come out, just my favorite films in general, which a lot of people didn't dislike it, but they couldn't quite follow it, and it just hit me like a slap in the face, was Where the Wild Things Are. Mm-hmm. And that's a movie that is entirely from the child's point of view, to a point where it's in his head and not everything is spelled out because even he doesn't know what he's necessarily doing. And the whole film is him working through his problems, but very vaguely, the way that kids actually do work through their problems with kind of this imagination and these characters, and he's talking with them, and he's going on these little travels and just sort of hanging and stuff, when in reality he's probably just whatever, sitting around in the grass, but you're seeing what he's seeing and what he's feeling, and the emotions are driving his thought process. And I think that's a really fascinating thing to do, and I think that is what keeps kids invested. Where the Wild Things Are might be a little too, I don't want to say deep, that's really pretentious, but it might be a little too abstract for a lot of people to follow. And, I don't think it's something you can just point and be like, oh, this character is obviously the father, this character is the mother. It's a little bit more spread out, which is why I find it so intriguing. But with something like, I think of something like, did you ever see Fly the Navigator growing up, or even older? You ever see that movie?
I don't think so.
Oh, it's so good. You gotta see it.
Okay.
But anyway, it's the first half is actually very adult. It's about this kid that somehow travels like 8-10 years into the future, and they don't know why. And a lot of it is technobabble. A lot of it is sort of connecting into this spaceship, and a lot of it's just sort of sitting around and talking and listening to these adults talk. And I remember thinking to myself, I saw this as a kid. Why was I invested? This is actually kind of boring. And I realized it's because it was from the kid's point of view. He was constantly not knowing what was going on and emotional and wanted answers, but he was afraid. I think there really is something to telling things from a child's point of view. I think that's sort of like the emotional core. I think that's why something like To Kill a Mockingbird still really works, because we've seen tons of stories about racism and prejudice, but when you sort of tell it from that unique point of view, that child point of view, because there is that imagination and that very simple, but in many respects kind of complex and still evolving mind, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating spot while also being very, very simple.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's why children's media right now, both really in terms of movies and shows, are so fascinating, because I think they're catching on to that and they're knowing, okay, we actually can be profitable and good. We can have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah, it's funny. On the note of Kill a Mockingbird, which that was a great point too. Very different kind of movie in this case, but that's Zootopia has become my new favorite Disney movie of all time for that very message. And not that Judy is a kid necessarily, but I think that she definitely has the kind of, I don't want to say like childlike naivete, but just that same kind of message coming across, and the fact that it is like a kid's animated movie that has such a strong kind of theme behind it, like that makes me so fucking happy. I think actually I would also agree you're right about Where the Wild Things Are probably being a little bit too abstract, and I would like to go back and rewatch that, because I remember seeing it in theaters when I was in college, and I enjoyed it, but I left being like, I didn't really take away any kind of like moral from that, like necessarily. And maybe that's not necessarily what it's about, but I think that it is worth giving that one a second view, just to maybe kind of like further figure out, because I didn't even draw that comparison of, oh, this character is like meant to be his issue with his dad and etc. Like I didn't even like get that.
But that's kind of the nice thing about it, because you don't know much about his. They don't give you a ton of details about his life. You know, there's little hints and clues, but there's not a ton of details. It's so in that respect, I feel it's much more realistic. I think like when we're kids, you know, we want to whatever go to our alone spot and sort of whatever play with our toys or even just make up adventures, and we're using what we're familiar with to work things out. You know, it's like if you have a fight with your parents, maybe you're battling something that's like really mean and really harsh, and you're the hero and stuff, and you have no idea you're connecting it to your parents, but it's not necessarily going to be like, I'm Captain Dad and Mom and I'm mean, I'm gonna, you know, you don't do it that obviously. You know, you sort of let it bounce around in your head and you come up with sort of these unique ideas and visions, and I think it's a way of working through your problems. And I think maybe because, you know, we're both in entertainment, we're both into, you know, writing and stories and stuff like that, we know how therapeutic that can be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what's funny too, because that's something I've been personally trying to dig deeper into, of like, I've probably said this a lot on Curb Laws before, but like, what am I saying with the story that I'm telling? You know, not just like, is it entertaining? Are the characters interesting? It's also like, what is the overarching like takeaway that the audience gets from this? I think actually on that note, kind of to start wrapping things up here, we've talked about a lot of different examples, you know, in all sorts of different mediums. What are maybe like one or two other examples that you could maybe give to people for like and it could be a game even, or a show or a movie, or a book, anything like that, that elicits that kind of feeling that you think is maybe like not very many people have seen, maybe if like it's from a little while back or whatever, or just some kind of suggestion maybe that like you don't see as often as you would like to.
You mean kind of like working through stuff in a different way kind of thing? Or?
That elicits like a really cool, like kind of childlike sense of wonderment that maybe like is not as often cited.
You know, the ones that are fascinating me more and more are the ones that run on emotional logic. I think Where the Wild Things Are is one. And I think for other ones, you kind of got to go back. I think you got to go to Wizard of Oz is very much an emotional story. It makes no sense. The logic to it is completely bonkers, but emotionally, you know, that's what drives the film. It's the girl's emotions. It's sort of like whatever she's feeling that sort of leads you to the next step. And the way it's all acted and portrayed and visually done. I mean, everything you feel, every emotion that you were supposed to feel in that movie. And even in a strange way, even though I don't watch it that much, I don't get that into it, I can see it in this film too. I see it in Snow White. It's sort of that same thing where it's like, I know people talk about like, oh, it's just she sits around, does nothing, and the prince comes. They don't even know each other, and they ride off into the castle. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but I mean, I think to me, it's very much the same thing with Where the Wild Things Are, where it's the emotion leading the story to a point where it doesn't logically make sense, but that's just kind of emotionally where you want to be, and you kind of want to go through these highs and lows. You want to be, in an okay spot, and then you're in a dangerous spot, then you're a place of safety, and then a place of happiness, and then a place where things get so bad it's almost like you're gone, you're dead, but then suddenly you're back and you're revived. And it's this strange emotional roller coaster that in a world of logic makes no sense, but I think in a fairy tale, it can actually be very gratifying, and it can sort of bring out these feelings out of you if you just kind of surrender to it and not think that much about it. And it's not always going to be something like Wizard of Oz or Snow White. I mean, it can be anything. But I think there's musical, there's opera. There's some operas I can actually get sucked into, like Wagner's music. I mean, just does this crazy thing to me where I listen to it and it just takes its time to seek its way in and find these emotions I didn't know I was even going through. So I think stuff like that, if you can kind of find that right source material that's going to speak to you and really kind of surrender yourself to it, just don't think about it, just kind of let it do what it does, I think you can find out a lot of great things about yourself. And it's going to be different for every person. I think you just have to find that connection. But yeah, those are probably the ones that connect with me.
Okay. I actually have a very, very wildly different example that just came to mind a little while ago. So for those of you who I'm sure out there, maybe if you're a little younger and you didn't grow up with a show called Codename Kids Next Door, what's really interesting to me about that show when I look back on it, and I even got this kind of point of it at the time, is that it's a show with a world that is designed entirely around like the kind of joke of kids think that they rule the world and they think that they know everything about the world, and they think that like adulthood is this weird ass like mysterious and in some cases bad kind of thing. But there's a particular it's like a TV movie. It's called Kids Next Door Operation Zero. And it is specifically about, number one, the main character, voiced by the lovely Ben Diskin, who I've had on the show many times, and his dad. And it is, I don't want to spoil too much of it. I think that it is on DVD. I might have a link to it down in the description if there is one. But it's a really cool, like, kind of self-contained story. You don't necessarily have to know everything about the full show, because the show actually does have a pretty good continuity to it throughout, like the 5 or 6 seasons it went on for. But it's a great story about bonding between a son and his father, growing up, leaving childhood behind, holding on to bits of your childhood, kind of a lot of different things that we've been talking about in this last like 10, 15 minutes or so in particular. I will say, and I think even Ben has agreed with me, that like some of the humor in Kids Next Door gets a little eye roll inducing, but it's not enough to make you not enjoy the story for what it was. Yeah, and like it's even back then, like it was like, oh God, shut up. But like I still was very much sucked into that show when I watched it as a kid, knowing that. So it's not like a detriment, to that further of an extent. That's kind of a more out there example that I can name if you can find Operation Zero.
Okay, well, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I know what it is. I haven't seen that much of it. But, and we talk about sort of these recent things. There are stuff like Steven Universe obviously can sort of give you these vague examples, which I think vague is good. I think a lot of people think everything has to be specific. But, I think like with Dark Knight and sort of that Matrix, right, where everything has to be so on the dot. We have it figured out, and here is the exact words and the philosophies and stuff like that. And we really got into that run for a while, which was fine. We need to think of that stuff. I think now we're kind of in this nice area of vagueness where we can watch something like Steven Universe and not need the message spelled out necessarily, or something like, the old Peanuts comic strips or cartoons and stuff. There's like just enough vagueness that you can read that and attribute it to something specific in your life, where someone else could attribute it to something completely different but just as specific. And I think that's one of the fun things that's going on right now, and I think it's really great. I mean, there's always going to be crud, but I think the good stuff we have right now is really beneficial. I think it's going to help develop people, like, you know, in the best way, both kids and adults.
Actually, this is a really good way to end this. I have one more suggestion that I think that you, if I'm remembering your thoughts on it, I think you might agree with this. And fittingly enough, it's a reboot slash reimagining. The new Peanuts movie. I thought very, very solid. It captured the spirit of the original. I think totally connectable to kids today. And to me, when I I'll even say, like, because I did a curb block with Mike Rocco about that one. I was not okay. I was super, super, super depressed when I saw that movie. And despite it being about a character who was relatively depressing, Charlie Brown, it made me have this hopeful sense of kid-like wonder and made me feel really, really good again. So, because I bring that one up because I actually heard a few people recently saying, like, they skipped down on it because they heard that it was, like, lame. And I'm like, no, I would say it's definitely worth checking out. Also, beautiful, beautiful animation, too, if you're a fan of that stuff.
It's one of the few times Charlie Brown kind of gets a happy ending. That doesn't happen that often.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up. So thank you for joining me for this hour of childhood wonder. You enlisted in.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one last recommendation.
Sure.
Bring up. I was going to say, you know, we touched on it before, but in terms of something that really captures that beauty of childhood and nostalgia and should be seen by everyone, I really think Blah 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 5 really because that's where it starts to come back. I felt they really forgot it and brought it to this good emotional place. So,
and I was so happy that they had Dennis Rodman have his cameo.
He can act. Like, he can really act, and just nobody knew it until they saw that movie. So, yeah.
I think his performance in that was way better than the first Blah Blah Blah, because I wasn't expecting them to bring him back as like the little throwback cameo or whatever. But like
the love scene with the squid is what did it. I mean, everybody's like, oh, he can't. It's Dennis Rodman as squid. That's not going to work. But they pulled it off, and they really made, you know, you feel for the squid.
Seriously, you know, and Bill Murray, his performance on the Squid character, just mwah, truly.
No, that's literally what they did. They went mwah, and somehow they made that just beautiful. So, no, it was really charming. Definitely, very highly recommended.
Hey, would you like to plug your social media shites and recommend any stuff that you have out as of? This will be coming out on Saturday the 13th. So anything maybe that might be coinciding with this, anything you want to give a plug to,
et cetera? Just go to channelawesome.com. You can see all of my videos there, but if you want to go the YouTube route, just type in Channel Awesome in the search. You'll see it there. A lot of the Nostalgia Critics are on there, and we're getting even more shows and videos put up, and just a lot of really, really great people working so hard and doing all sorts of cool material. So I'd love for you guys to drop by.
Which is, and if you guys are into Steven Universe or Gravity Falls or Adventure Time, he and Rob and other such friends who join us once in a while have been doing vlogs on each individual episode. There's a whole slew of ones that just came out that I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, we're going to start watching them tomorrow. Hopefully the videos will be out by the time.
I hope to God nobody has spoiled anything major
not
yet.
Not
yet. Good. You are in for a fucking ride, let me tell you what.
That's what I'm hearing. That's the one thing that's been spoiled, is that apparently I really need to see them.
Yeah. I know, and they've been fun. They're great listening material for while I'm animating, so I thank you guys for doing those. Cool. Well, check Doug and his stuff out, and in the comments below, as we wrap things up here, if you have any experiences or other recommendations that kind of coincide with them, any of the ones that we mentioned in particular that really elicit that sense of wonderment of, whether if you're a younger listener and, you're at that age specifically, or if you're an older listener and you kind of get what we're talking about. If there are specific examples where you feel like it totally goes against that and it's kind of like a cheap, cash in, like, remember this nostalgia kind of bullshit, give some examples of that too, kind of in contrast if you like. Anything, give us your thoughts in the comments. Love to hear them. And as always, if you have future Curblot topic suggestions, in fact, if you have any topic suggestions that might involve Douglas to come back at some point, leave a comment about that, or hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, all the usual bullcrap, you get it. Doug, thank you again. Much appreciated. Hope you had a great time on this, and we will see you all later. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.